Hello, guys. This is Chipster Apple here. Tonight, I will be reviewing a video game for the Nintendo Game Boy Pocket here called Game and Watch Gallery. And as you can see, this is a game in old Game Boy graphic technology. The Game Boy Pocket was just a smaller version of the original Game Boy, which looked more like a Nintendo brick, at least in electronic metaphor. And this is Game Boy Pocket with presentation of Game & Watch Gallery here, which contains what was back then modern versions of Game Watch games classics and the original sort of versions by Game Boy standards of original classic Game Watch games. And I will begin gameplay here. And this is a game where you can earn a lot of stars for your mobile gameplay of arcade performance. I'm going to do what I believe to be something interesting, at least for the moment of this review. I'll try some, how about fire? Now, what is fire, you're probably wondering? Well, I'll play the original Nintendo mobile version of Fire game, and you'll see what it is. It is like Pong, and it definitely will look like Pong when you see the original classic version. See that? Can you believe that? But in the 90s, these graphics were way better than Atari's Pong, because although the Game Boy Pocket screen is not bright like a smartphone screen, it does have pixel dot technology from the 90s, similar to the way graphics were presented on old sports programming for the menu boards showing the point counts for baseball games and football games and soccer games and such. There were those old scorekeepers for sports games in gyms back then, especially with the Boys and Girls Club. And I actually was exposed to a lot of old-style retro vid games in the 90s growing up by visiting Boys and Girls Club as a child. And even then, there are a lot of kids who did see this sort of Game Boy stuff, and well, some of them were excited that the Game Boy was here, and others were actually disappointed in it, like definitely it was not a universal praise for the Game Boy back then. Some cared about it, some did not, some actually hated it. Hate sounds like a powerful word, but hate just basically means in dictionary terms something like detesting the quality of something to a more realistic level of poor understanding and poor expectations. So it's kind of like love, but kind of like on the reverse side, which is weird, but evil can lie about evil, remember that. And you're seeing this fire game, and wow. This is obviously a comedy sort of collection, because you do not rescue fire passengers from a fire building like that in real life, but that is funny to see on screen. Let me do another game just to show how this game can be comedy. Let me do Octopus. And I'll once again do the classic version. And wow. Okay. Is there really an octopus in real life that looks bigger than a Titanic? Or the Edmund Fitzgerald? I do not think Lifewood mentioned that octopus. I'm very sure. I mean, that's why this video game collection is a comedy. It is. It's a parody of human roles. It's a fantasy in that sense. And definitely there's a lot to be said for this kind of approach. Like in this case, I'm actually getting gold coins from a treasure chest underwater and bringing it back to my research sailboat upstairs. Although I do not see a sail, which is, maybe it's a rowing boat, who knows? Or maybe an emergency boat. But definitely, this is a really nice collection of sorts. And I do not want to spoil too much of the game because this is a review. But I will show what it's like when it's face. Okay, so this is face front for me. And, oh man, did that just happen? You see how close I am to the camera? This is how close I need to be to my Game Boy Pocket practically to even play this game. And I'm so close, you're probably thinking that my smartphone view almost looks broken. And I think it's for that reason that Atari was still a very popular series of video game consoles for a long time, even in the 90s and 2000s, because, well, you could play those Atari games on the TV from a longer distance and sit on a more comfortable position and not feel so uptight and restricted. So, in a way, when you go with the history terms of it, the failure of the economic performance of the Virtual Boy was also a sign of the eventual economic collapse of the Game Boy market. Because old video games sometimes do become obsolete, or even worse than obsolete, like kind of like more like on offensive territory. Let me switch back. And yeah, I mean, that's of course a funny game, of course. Big octopus, okay. So somewhere under the ocean, there's an octopus who is big. There's an octopus who is bigger than every American ship on Earth. Okay, that's weird. But that's why this is a fantasy. And this is a game that has modern versions of these 4 games, as well as classic games. Let me show Oil Panic in modern version, because I think that's the most important modern version that is here. And here's why. Gone are the Pong graphics, and I get graphics that are more like Super Mario World material. And definitely the Game Boy was a subsidy that was working right along with the Super Nintendo. And back then you could even get a Super Game Boy that played Game Boy games right on the Super Nintendo home gaming console. So Super Nintendo and Game Boy are cousins. They are. They have similar technologies. Although obviously Game Boy is more oriented on the black and white tradition of film rather than the Super Nintendo comfort of increasing pixelation and increasing mobility and power. So, and you can see Bowser on top of the castle, and he's pouring oil into this castle to try to cause a fire right in the castle. And and that is obviously not an option for Princess Peach's kitchen, and, well, fire safety is important here. And I think this game, for a lot of my improving senses of gameplay ergonomics over time. But anyways, that's the end of my review here. I think this collection is very good of Game Boy games, and this is a Game Boy classic, and I will end my video tonight by talking about something that I must prove as legal advice for this video. And let me turn off the Game Boy and get started on my legal advice. Okay. So, all right. Okay. So you see here, the fantasies there. You know, you like my Crayola cowboy outfit? I look awesome. I decorated this with Crayola crowns, and Crayola crowns here. And definitely, I am very much a fashionista. Now, let's remember something when it comes to the difference between, like, let's say, fiction and sports. Fiction, as you know, such as Mario, Sonic, Pac-Man, and such, are fictions, are fantasies, and are not real problems. However, traditional sports like baseball, football, soccer, golf, basketball, are real problems and are not fictions. And I encourage my viewers not to borrow art manners for sports manners, so we all have a good society.